Namaskar and welcome to Sansad Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our show Perspective, where we bring you detailed analysis of key national and international issues. Today we're going to talk about the issue of a remote voting facility. Now, the Election Commission of India has decided to set up a committee to explore the possibility of allowing migrant workers to vote remotely on a pilot basis. According to ECI, there needs to be a concerted effort to see problems faced by migrant workers in exercising their franchise. ECI had set up a 4-member panel in 2020 to assess the technology landscape to enable remote voting. The panel, which consists of members from IIT-Bhilai, IIT-Bombay, IIT-Madras and the National Informatics Centre, that is NIC, has presented a concept plan to ECI to enable a two-way transfer of vote and ballot. Currently, postal ballots are meant only for service voters such as army personnel who cannot return to cast their vote. So what is remote voting? How will it work on the ground? And what are the challenges in the implementation of this process? For more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of experts. Let me first introduce them to you. Beginning with, we have with us Mr. O.P. Rawat. He is the former Chief Election Commissioner of India. We're also joined by Dr. A.K. Verma, political analyst, and Mr. Pradeep Gupta, Chairman and Managing Director of Access My India, is also joining us. Welcome, all of you gentlemen, to Sansad Television. I'll begin with you, Mr. Rawat. Let's first start by understanding this a bit more in detail about this concept of remote voting facility. What does it indicate and what does it entail?
Actually, remote voting has been on the minds of Election Commission of India since very long, 2015, when first they commissioned CDAC to develop technology for one-way electronic journey of ballot, for e-postal ballot to be given to service voters. That materialized in 2017, and it was inaugurated when Punjab, Goa, these states went to polls, and it had really good impact. Earlier, service voters were participating just 2 to 3%. And after inaugurating e-postal ballot, one-way electronic journey of the ballot, participation went up to 67%. People who are guarding our borders could participate in the most important democratic exercise of elections. At that time, Election Commission commissioned CDAC for return journey of ballot electronically, so that remote voting could be possible, because there is a void for people who are creating wealth for us, like migrant workers, NRIs, and they can't vote unless they come to the polling station during the election time. So that project was given. Afterwards, Election Commission engaged with IIT Chennai also for blockchain technology, and they made other efforts also. However, the first important thing in this subject is about the definition of migrant workers. There is no legal definition of migrant workers. And therefore, first of all, the committee set up by ECI will have to exercise their brains on an acceptable definition of migrant workers who are made eligible to vote through this process. Then election laws will have to be amended, rules will have to be changed, and the technology for which this task force in 2020 under Professor Rajat Poona, Director IIT-Bhilai, was constituted, then the technology will come.
Okay, those are three important aspects which you brought in, Mr. Rawat, and we'll go deeper into those as well, because those are the challenges when we're talking about the on-ground implementation of this aspect. But let's also understand it a bit deeper when we're talking about migrant workers, when we're talking about the NRI voters as well. Specifically coming to the case and issue of migrant workers, Dr. Verma, I'd like to bring you in here. This has been an ongoing debate that the Constitution of India gives the powers to every citizen above 18 years of age to cast their vote, but then there are hindrances, and most of those hindrances are faced by migrant workers. They are, in movement to earn their livelihood, but they're not, permanent or temporary residents of a particular area where they might be on the day the voting is taking place.
I think Vishal, I would very much appreciate the move of Election Commission to contemplate remote, voting. And I personally see this thing as an effort to make the entire political process more inclusive. You are talking about, a particular segment right now, and of course, when the ECI starts with the whole project initially, it will have to have a kind of a pilot thing first, maybe with the NRIs, maybe with the a pocket migrant voters and all. But ultimately, then, like the EVM and the VVPATs, they have now spread to the entire country and all the constituencies. If you start this business of, remote voting, then probably in few years' time, this would be spreading to the whole of the country. And therefore, I would consider that not only the migrant workers, but there are many people who are not able to vote. And now, I'm not very sure about what the methodology, we'll probably talk about that later. But right now, conceptually, I understand that the entire business of remote control voting is, number one, going to make the entire political process more inclusive. And certainly, this will be greatly, great improvement over the postal ballot that now we have. And it will also administratively, greatly convenience the Election Commission of India. But I have certain apprehensions which I will share a little later.
Okay.
But in the beginning, I think I would greatly appreciate this move.
Okay.
Of course, technical experts are involved; they would probably take care of. But I have certain anxieties that I will share.
Okay, we'll come to those apprehensions and challenges there as well. But let me first bring in Mr. Gupta here. Mr. Gupta, how would you assess, because you've had a closer look at elections across the country, assembly, Lok Sabha polls as well. Now, let's also look at it from the data point of view. Roughly, 1/3 of the eligible voters in 2019 Lok Sabha elections did not cast their vote. Now, of course, some of them would be perhaps averse to the idea of casting the vote, but most of them would be limited by their circumstances.
Yes. So let me tell you, as India, we are the largest democracy, and we should make it further stronger by inclusion of those who are not able to vote. As you rightly mentioned, in 2019 general election, there was a 67% turnout, meaning leaving us out roughly 1/3 of the voter population. Though it looks 1/3, precisely it is 30 crore voters who could not vote for various and obvious reasons. So 30 crore is a too big a size, too big a size. If we can include them through remote voting, and as Mr. Verma and Mr. Rawat mentioned, so it's not only the migrated workers, it's the people who are traveling for their own different purposes outside their hometown. I mean, they are the very important. Then the senior citizens. Then the extreme conditions, sometimes the kind of heat, particularly during a general election, which generally happens during April and May time, and temperature goes up to 45 degrees. So that is also somehow, people are reluctant to come in certain category. So this remote voting is very important, provided it is authentic and eliminate the kind of so-called fake voter and so on and so forth.
Okay.
I am sure the technical committee is definitely working mainly on this aspect.
Okay, this perhaps might also help, raising the vote percentage in urban areas as well, because that is also one pocket where there has been a lot of effort being put in place, but the voting percentage still doesn't seem to be consistent with the effort.
Yes, it is actually urban. It is roughly 50% voting turnout in urban India and about 80% in rural India, making it to roughly 65, 64, 66%.
Okay. I'll go back to Mr. Rawat here. Mr. Rawat, you were earlier talking about, few challenges, which are, of course, they are first defining who might be eligible for, exercising their franchise through this process. Of course, as Dr. Verma was saying, down the line, perhaps this might become easily available as the EVMs and VVPAT machines are in use right now. But to start with, and then, of course, the technical aspect of it, how do we ensure it? So the basic question is, What's the premise? How would it work? As of now, as a voter, if I have to cast my vote, I'll have to get up, take my documentation, go to the voting center, a polling booth, and get my identification verified, and then cast my ballot. How will it work in this process?
This is quite in the realms of future, and we will have to visualize as to how will it work. But there is an example in Gujarat, local body polls, remote voting or internet voting has been in vogue since 2010. But to our utter surprise, the utilization of remote voting mechanism in Gujarat has been very poor. Just about 2 to 3% voters utilize remote voting facilities. So putting that much of faith and confidence that remote voting will be a game changer, I don't think it is so. Another thing is that this 33% voters are not coming to vote. It is not only due to the reason that they have to walk to the polling station. There are many other reasons. In fact, there may be hundreds of reasons, and therefore we will have to analyze everything. But to come to the main point, it's really important that we must afford opportunity to everyone, whosoever is eligible to vote according to Article 326 of the Constitution. They should be facilitated, and therefore Election Commission is making all efforts. Now, the issue comes of security of ballot, removing all vulnerabilities, and making all political parties and candidates have trust in the system. And therefore, Election Commission is exploring the various means, different technologies, and how to go about it. And that's why this committee has been set up by the Election Commission recently. And we hope that it will suggest ways and means which will satisfy everyone.
Okay.
And they will have to take all political parties and other stakeholders on board before inaugurating this.
Okay. Dr. Verma, you earlier said that you had some apprehensions in terms of the challenges this sort of project might face. So if you could bring them on board, then we can bring in the other two panelists as well to seek their views as to how do they look at those aspects.
As I have already said, I am greatly enthused by this entire concept. But at the same time, I am greatly anxious about certain nitty-gritties of the operationalization of this entire business. And one is the secrecy of ballot paper. People are talking about blockchain technologies, and they are talking about bringing in biometrics and all. But blockchain technology, like the cryptos, they are giving example. But the blockchain technology and the crypto and the biometrics, they will ensure that you are able to vote without disclosing your vote. But I am talking of the Indian context. Suppose you give this remote voting to the people of India and ask them to vote from their domestic premise or from village or from an environment where a lot of people are standing or available. So I, as an individual, know that if I wish, nobody would know my vote. But you have to visualize the conditions of India and Indian families where women are very vulnerable, where the poor and the Dalits and the subalterns are very vulnerable, where the migrant workers are very subalternable, very vulnerable because their documentation with the employer and so on and so forth. So will they be coerced? That is my first example. And blockchain technology and this biometrics will not take care of that. That is my first problem.
Okay.
And my second anxiety is that the Election Commission has been always focusing on raising the voters' turnout, and this is a business to raise the voter turnout. But will in India anybody would talk about raising the quality of the elected representatives? What we are doing, because what is happening is if you analyze the data of the parliament today, you will find that a very huge number, probably around 90%, are crorepati's, and so many are having criminal antecedents.
Okay.
Where is the space for the common man? So how the Election Commission proposes to bring them in? Remote voting will increase the vote share. But what about the increasing the vote, increase the share of the good representatives?
Okay.
Who will talk about that?
That indeed is a very important part of the entire process of electoral reforms, which has been debated. But going back to your first apprehension, I'd like to bring in Mr. Rawat first here before I go to Mr. Gupta. In terms of the issue of secrecy of ballot, would you agree with Dr. Verma here that that is the moot and the basic question which has to be taken care of in terms of putting the technological landscape in place?
Certainly, secrecy of ballot is very important, and therefore, Election Commission will take it into account while selecting the technology, the process, and what Mr. Verma is saying that from home. But mostly, remote voting in such cases is not from home. It is permitted from a nearby polling booth, which is set up almost everywhere where such voters are residing. And the facility has to be provided to the political parties and candidates to appoint their agent. Because unless their representation is there, how can they be sure that the right voter was given the chance to vote? So all those checks and balances are there, and when Election Commission takes or selects any technology, any process, they will see that all these things are satisfied.
Okay. Mr. Gupta, of course, one thing which all three panelists agree upon is that this will indeed give a boost to the democratic process and bring more people into the net of those who are already exercising their franchise. But in terms of, issues raised by both Mr. Rawat and Dr. Verma here as well, what's your viewpoint? Secrecy of ballot being one, identifying the pool of people who might be eligible for such sort of, a process to benefit from. That is also another one.
Yeah, in my viewpoint, as far as technical aspects goes, the secrecy, like we participate in a tender process, e-tender process, and our price bid is, I'm sure, is secured to the large extent, unless somebody wants to open it. I mean, that is something a will issue, but there is no problem as far as the technical aspect is concerned. Now, coming to most important point in my mind is whether whoever is voted is the right person. Making sure this aspect, because you may send the link based on your Aadhaar link or like your bank account link, but whether the link is open and vote is cast by the right person is my concern.
Verification and veracity.
Verification of the right person who has voted through that particular link, which is meant for that particular person or the voter.
Okay. I'm sure those are the issues which the Election Commission and its committees and panels and the experts and professionals out there would be also grappling with and trying to find answers to them. And of course, a full proper roadmap will be put in place. But going a step further, Mr. Rawat, you've been there with the Election Commission, you've done that, so you will have a much broader view in terms of what more can be done, because remote voting is, of course, as of now, it might look like a novel idea to us, but down the line, once the processes are in place, once all the hiccups have been taken care of, this might become a normal structure. What more can be done? Because there are other certain groups, pockets as well. For example, earlier we were talking about urban voters. There seems to be not a bit of an improvement in terms of the voting percentage in certain pockets of urban areas.
These pockets can be easily identified, like Uttar Pradesh. You see, continuously it will throw up 50%, 55%, 56% voting. Whereas Assam, West Bengal, they will throw up 90%, 92% polling. So things are localized, and specific efforts to identify the causes there and to sensitize the voters there will be needed. And I think Election Commission is focused on that also. But remote voting for migrant workers is very important from the point of view that these are the poorest of the poor people who go out of their dwelling house or dwelling place in search of a livelihood.
Okay.
And therefore, Election Commission is focused on bringing them in the democratic process of elections.
Okay. Dr. Verma, remote voting is, of course, one of the ideas which is being worked upon. And as you were also saying earlier, the Election Commission of India keeps on doing a lot of voter awareness programs as well to ensure that each voter is aware of his right to cast his vote, exercise the franchise at the right time, depending upon his or her choice. But the idea is to increase these numbers, and perhaps we should not rest till the time it comes to 100%. So what can be done to reach that 100% mark? What more can be done?
Vishal, 100% would be a little, too idealistic and too ambitious.
Well, we can
And
set
let us-
idealistic
let us-
targets, sir, but I'm sure once
I'm
that
sure-
happens, then only we'll
I'm
be able to
sure.
be.
I'm sure the ECI is seized with that thing. But you see, we are also expected, besides an issue to give remote voting, we are also, the ECI must also be seized with the issue of one thing. I will just for example, ECI might be knowing this, the issue of EPIC. I have an EPIC which is issued by the Election Commission of India, which is a valid document for identification so far as the voting is concerned. But when I go to the polling booth, I don't find that my name is there in the electoral roll. So either the EPIC is, downgraded or devalued, or there is some problem with the voters list.
Okay.
But the voters list is given importance. So number one is that the ECI should be handling this question very importantly, and this can be linked to the Aadhaar, this can be linked to the biometrics, so that if I hold a valid, election commission card, that will greatly increase the number, because sometimes the areas, voters, their names are out. That is one thing that the election commission can do.
Okay.
The second is that the problem which my friend from Axis raised just now is that he was only worried about the identification that the right person was voting. Suppose you are the right person, election commission sends you the link, and I am standing with a gun on your head. That I'm just hypothetical example.
Yes.
That yes, you are the right person, but the vote the way I want you to vote. So what you will handle, what you will do with that? So that is the second concern. Third is that as soon as you bring in the remote voting, the internet comes into the picture. You cannot send. You have to use the internet, and all those America had to do away with the entire this business because there are suspicions that internet is being hijacked. So my concern is that remote voting is fine, but remote voting should not be remote controlled in any way by any side, whether this side or that side, whether from my family side or my village side or for the ruffian side or maybe by the election commission. Nobody should be allowed.
Indeed.
And the technical committee which has been set up by the ECI must ensure that how this can be ensured that your vote is not only that your vote, but it also free, fair and fearless vote.
Okay. That sums it up. Not only identity, not only secrecy, but also has to maintain that it is safe, it is free and fair as well. Quick concluding comments from you, Mr. Gupta, as well, before we bring this to an end.
Yes, so as far as Mr. Verma mentioned, this very aspect of fair polling system, there are cases and incident and which is continuously happening. There are some fringe element. They give you 1,000 rupees and they take your voter ID card so you don't go and exercise your vote. I mean, if these things has to happen, that can happen anywhere and everywhere. I mean, that is something, remote voting is anyways more protected than you going and, polling in a polling booth where you are exposed. But if you do the remote voting, there are two aspects, as Mr. Rawat mentioned. Then you have to go to the nearby vote. I am going further to this. I should be able to vote from my mobile or some instrument sitting wherever I am. Only thing is that authenticity.
Okay. Authenticity does matter, and of course,
everything is that.
The checks and balances will have to be put in place. Something on which the Election Commission of India and its team is working on. Thank you so much, Mr. Pradeep Gupta, Dr. Verma and Mr. O.P. Rawat as well for sharing your views and insight. As our experts were pointing out, of course, the concept of a remote voting facility is a wonderful one, and it is likely to add more value to our democratic system. But there are certain challenges, and those challenges are being worked upon, ensuring that proper checks and balances are put into the system so that voting through remote means is free, fair, as well as secure. We'll come back again with a different topic. Till then, keep watching Sansad Television. Thank you.